The millionaire walked into a small shop in the countryside and left with his heart complete. And you will not believe how destiny prepared this meeting that seemed impossible to happen. Arthur Montenegro was a man accustomed to living among skyscrapers, gala dinners, and endless commitments. His routine was marked by meetings in luxurious offices, travels in private jets, and social engagements where everyone approached him for the power and fortune he represented. But behind the expensive suits and impeccable posture, there was a deep emptiness. Arthur had everything money could buy, but he felt he possessed nothing that truly filled his soul. On a certain weekend, tired of that suffocating routine, he decided to do something different. He took his car and drove without a destination, just to get away from the big city. The narrow roads, the smell of the countryside, and the simple landscape began to bring a sense of freedom he had not felt in a long time. And it was then that, almost by chance, he passed through a small countryside town, one of those that seems to have stopped in time. Colorful houses, cobblestone streets, children playing on the sidewalks, and people greeting each other as if everyone knew one another. Arthur parked the car and began to walk slowly, observing that simple life that contrasted so much with his own. It was then that his eyes were drawn to a small craft shop. The facade was simple, but there was something welcoming, almost magical about that place. A handwritten wooden sign said, "Hope Shop." Intrigued, Arthur decided to enter. The bell at the door rang when he pushed the worn wood, and the aroma of dried flowers and freshly polished wood filled the environment. The shelves were full of unique pieces, hand-painted vases, small sculptures, colorful embroideries, and objects that clearly had more sentimental value than financial worth. Behind the counter, a young woman worked concentrating, delicately embroidering a linen cloth. Her brown hair fell over her shoulders, and her face, illuminated by a charming simplicity, exuded a peace that Arthur had never seen amidst the superficiality of the world in which he lived. When she raised her eyes and met his, Arthur felt his heart race in a way he no longer believed was possible. "Good morning," she said with a sweet smile. "Welcome. Are you looking for something special?" Arthur for a moment did not know what to answer. He was not used to being treated in such a simple and sincere way. People normally looked at him with interest, with ulterior motives, but there it was different. He took a deep breath and responded, "Actually, I do not know exactly. I saw the shop and felt the urge to come in." The young woman smiled even more, closing the embroidery and standing up. "Then you entered the right place. Sometimes the things we are not looking for are precisely the ones we most need to find." That phrase was engraved in Arthur. He walked through the shop slowly, observing every detail. It was as if each piece had a story. Each object carried the soul of whoever created it. He felt different, as if he had stopped being the powerful man for a few moments and could just be human. Curious, he asked, "Do you make all this by yourself?" She nodded with pride. "Yes. It is the work of my life. We inherited this shop from my grandmother, and since I was little I learned to value every detail, everything made with love. We do not have luxury, but we have truth." Arthur smiled, enchanted by the way she spoke. Truth. That word hammered in his mind, because it was precisely what was missing in his life. He had wealth, he had fame, he had power, but he did not have truth. They spent minutes that seemed like hours talking. She was called Clara and had dedicated her life to keeping the shop alive, even in the midst of financial difficulties. She told him that many times she almost gave up, but the love for what she did and for the town kept her firm. Arthur listened to every word as if it were music, enchanted by the simplicity of that woman who did not need anything beyond the essential to be happy. And it was there, in that small countryside shop, that Arthur began to feel something he had not felt in a long time. Hope, not just any hope, but the sensation that perhaps his life could take another direction. When he realized, almost an hour had already passed inside there. Stories, smiles, and silences that were not awkward, but rather comfortable. At the moment to leave, Arthur hesitated. He did not want to leave. He did not want to lose that instant that seemed magical. "Can I come back?" he asked almost shyly. Something rare for a man accustomed to commanding everything around him. Clara laughed lightly, adjusting her hair behind her ear. "The shop is always open for those who come with a light heart." Arthur left there feeling like a different man. He walked through the simple streets of the town with a lightness he did not remember having felt in recent years. He could not explain exactly, but something had changed. That unexpected encounter seemed to have ignited a flame inside him. And without realizing it, it was at that moment that Arthur Montenegro, the millionaire accustomed to having everything, discovered that inside a small countryside shop, he had found something that no money in the world could buy: the possibility of filling his empty heart. The millionaire entered that small shop and left there with something that would change his life forever. His heart, for the first time in a long time, began to feel complete. Arthur Montenegro left the small shop that afternoon, carrying more than a simple paper bag with a handmade souvenir he had bought from Clara. He left carrying a new sensation, almost strange for someone like him, who lived in a hurry, calculating every step of his life. As he walked back to the car, his heart seemed to beat at a different rhythm, as if he had discovered a forgotten melody. He got into his luxury vehicle, but instead of starting and continuing his journey, he remained a few minutes stopped, looking through the rearview mirror at the simple facade of the shop. The sun reflected on the wooden sign that swayed gently with the wind, and the distant sound of children playing in the street completed that scene that seemed straight out of a movie. Deep down, Arthur knew it was not just curiosity that held him there. It was as if he had found a lost piece inside himself, something he did not know he needed until that moment. The millionaire who always solved everything with money, contacts, and influence, now found himself attracted to something that could not be bought: the true simplicity of Clara. In the following days, that image did not leave his mind. In the midst of meetings, millionaire contracts, and video calls with businessmen from other countries, Arthur found himself remembering Clara's smile, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the sweet way she spoke about her grandmother's shop. He even lost his train of thought during an important negotiation, something unthinkable for him. His partners noticed there was something different, but Arthur just said he was tired. Tired, yes, but tired of a life that had never brought him true peace. It was then that, on a Saturday morning, without warning anyone, Arthur took to the road again, drove for hours, but this time he already knew where he was going. The path to that small countryside town seemed shorter than before, as if destiny were guiding him with haste. When he parked in front of the shop, his heart raced, and when he opened the door, again the bell chimed, and the same smell of dried flowers and wood enveloped him. Clara raised her eyes from the counter and smiled, surprised. "You came back," she said in a tone that mixed joy and slight disbelief. Arthur, for an instant, felt like a boy in front of her. "I said I would come back, did I not?" She laughed, setting aside the embroidery that was in her hands. "Many say it, but few fulfill it." Arthur then approached and began to observe the shelves again. But the truth is, he was not interested in the objects. He was interested in that sensation that Clara provoked in him. A lightness, a humanity that he had long lost. This time they spent the entire afternoon talking. Clara told him more about her life, about how her family had always lived there, about how much she loved that place despite the difficulties. She spoke of the sleepless nights she spent embroidering to manage to pay the shop bills, and the times she thought about giving up, but was prevented by a greater force: the memory of her grandmother and the desire to keep the tradition alive. Arthur, for the first time in many years, also opened his heart. He told about his busy life, about the loneliness he felt even surrounded by people, about how many times he looked out the window of his luxurious apartment and felt an impossible emptiness to explain. Clara listened attentively, without judgments, without interest in his money, just with true attention. This completely disarmed him. When they realized, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in orange tones. Arthur offered to help her close the shop, and Clara, laughing, said he did not need to, but still accepted the company. While they put some objects inside and locked the door, Arthur noticed something in Clara that went beyond physical beauty. There was a silent strength, a dignity that did not depend on riches. Before saying goodbye, Arthur hesitated. "Clara, I would like to see you outside of here. Perhaps have dinner with me someday." She raised her eyebrows, surprised. She was not used to invitations like that, especially coming from someone like him. "I do not know if we fit very well into that type of meeting," she responded somewhat shyly. "I do not want luxury, I do not want anything different, I just want to spend time by your side. It can even be here in the town." Clara thought for a few seconds and then smiled. "All right. Tomorrow at 8 there is a simple cantina here on the back street. If you want, we can meet there." Arthur left there almost unable to believe she had accepted. On the way back to the hotel where he would spend the night, he felt anxious, like a teenager before his first date. The anticipation, the excitement, the butterflies in his stomach, all of this was new to him, who always had calculated relationships, often superficial. That night, lying in the bed of the simple hotel room, Arthur took a while to fall asleep. He kept imagining what the meeting would be like, what they would talk about, if Clara would be beautiful. Although he knew that for him she was already beautiful in her essence, without needing anything beyond that sincere smile. The millionaire, who had entered by chance into a small countryside shop, now found himself prisoner to a feeling he could not control. And for the first time in a long time, this did not scare him. On the contrary, it made him feel alive again. The next morning, Arthur woke up early, even without having slept well. The sun entered through the thin curtains of the simple hotel where he had stayed, and each ray of light seemed to remind him that the day would be special. He got up, took a shower, and spent a good time in front of the mirror, trying to convince himself that he did not need to impress Clara with his appearance. For the first time, he did not want the expensive suit, the Swiss watch, or the exclusive perfume to speak for him. He wanted her to see only the man behind the image of the millionaire. Even so, the anxiety was so much that he changed clothes 3 times until he chose something simpler than he used to wear: a light linen shirt, jeans, and discreet shoes. The day dragged slowly. Arthur tried to distract himself, walking around the town, talking with residents, observing details he would not have paid attention to before. He bought fresh bread in an old bakery, sat in the square to see children playing, and even observed a group of elderly men playing dominoes under a tree. It was as if he were rediscovering a world he had never known. And in each simple scene he remembered Clara, imagining how she fit perfectly into that tranquil life. When the clock struck 7:30 in the evening, Arthur was already ready but still nervous. He walked slowly through the narrow streets until he reached the cantina indicated by Clara. The place was small, with an exposed brick facade and a weathered wooden sign that said, "Grandma's Cantina." Inside, the smell of fresh pasta and tomato sauce spread through the air, mixed with the sound of laughter and soft music coming from an old record player. Arthur entered and looked for Clara. And there she was, sitting at a table in the corner, wearing a simple light blue dress that highlighted her bright eyes. Her hair was loose, falling softly over her shoulders, and the smile appeared as soon as she saw him. Arthur felt his heart race as if he were about to start something that would change his life forever. "I thought maybe you would give up coming," Clara said with a slight joking tone when he approached. "And miss the chance to have dinner with you," Arthur replied, pulling out the chair and sitting down. "Not even if all my businesses were at risk would I let that happen." She laughed, and the laughter sounded like music to him. The waiter approached and brought the menu, but Arthur noticed that Clara was already known in the place. The waiter greeted her warmly, calling her by name, and asked if she would order the usual. Clara nodded with a smile, and Arthur, curious, asked, "The usual?" "Spaghetti with homemade sauce," she replied, laughing. "It is nothing sophisticated, but it is made with love." "Then I will also want the usual," he said, closing the menu without even looking. "If it is what you like, it must be good." The waiter took note and moved away, and the two were alone at the table, facing a silence that, far from being uncomfortable, seemed loaded with expectation. "You know, Arthur, I still find it strange that you are here," Clara confessed, fidgeting with her fingers on the checkered tablecloth. "People like you do not appear just like that, out of nowhere in a small town." Arthur rested his elbows on the table and looked into her eyes. "People like me? What does that mean?" "You are different. You can tell by the way you dress, the way you speak. You are not from here or from nearby towns. You come from a completely different world from mine." Arthur sighed. "It is true. My world is made of luxury, commitments, and often loneliness. But just because it is my world does not mean it is better. On the contrary. When I entered your shop, I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace." Clara blushed, looking away, surprised by his sincerity. "Peace in me," she murmured. "Yes," Arthur replied. "You have a way of seeing life that makes me believe that maybe I have been living wrong all this time." Clara remained silent, but a small smile appeared on her lips. It was hard to believe that a millionaire, surrounded by everything money could buy, could envy her simple life. The food arrived, and the smell of homemade spaghetti filled the table. Arthur tasted the first forkful and closed his eyes, savoring every detail. "It is incredible," he said, genuinely impressed. "It seems I have never really eaten until today." Clara laughed. "You are exaggerating." "No," Arthur insisted. "The difference is that here there is something I do not find in my world. Truth." They continued to talk while they dined. Clara told stories from childhood, times when she helped her grandmother in the shop, simple town parties, and even nights when she stayed up embroidering to pay the bills. Arthur listened attentively, laughing at some moments, moved at others. He, in turn, opened up as never before. He spoke about how he grew up in a cold family, where affection was always replaced by expensive gifts. He spoke about women who approached him more for what he had than for who he was. Clara listened without judgment, just with that sincere look that seemed to cross all his defenses. It was as if each word said at that table were a brick torn down from the wall Arthur had built around himself over the years. After dinner, Arthur insisted on paying the bill, but Clara protested. "You do not need to." "I invited you, and I accepted," he responded firmly, but smiling. "Please, let me pay." She gave in and they left together to the street. The night was fresh and the starry sky stretched above them, much clearer than Arthur was used to seeing in the big city. They walked side by side, talking about trivialities, until they reached the central square, where there was a bandstand illuminated by yellow lights. Some children were still playing, and couples sat on the benches talking. Arthur stopped, looked at Clara, and said, "Thank you for today, for every word, for every smile. You cannot imagine how much this means to me." Clara faced him, not knowing how to respond. Deep down, she also felt something different, but did not have the courage to admit it. Instead, she just smiled and said, "It was a pleasant evening." When they said goodbye, Arthur held her hand for a few seconds longer than necessary. And in that simple touch, he felt there was no turning back anymore. He was completely involved. That night, when he lay down, Arthur realized that life had changed. It was no longer just about business, money, or achievements. Now there was Clara and the feeling that, for the first time, he had found something truly worth fighting to conquer. In the days that followed the dinner, Arthur Montenegro could no longer keep Clara out of his thoughts. His mind, once dominated by numbers, contracts, and travels, was now taken over by her smile, by the simple way she spoke about the simple things in life. The millionaire who before lived in a hurry began to count the days, almost the hours, to be able to return to that small countryside town. And he returned not just once, but several times. At first he told himself he was just passing through, that he wanted to rest from the rush of the big city. But the truth is his destiny was already traced, Clara's shop. Every time the door opened and the little bell rang, Clara raised her eyes and smiled with surprise, as if she still found it unbelievable that that man so different was again before her. "You really are making this a habit, are you not?" she said on one of the visits, laughing while arranging some craft pieces on the shelf. Arthur leaned on the counter, crossing his arms and facing her with a look that mixed seriousness and affection. "And if it is a habit to be near you, then it is the best habit I have ever had in my life." Clara blushed, looking away, but could not hide her smile. Over time, Arthur's presence in town began to draw attention. It was not common to see a man of sophisticated appearance who arrived in a luxury car, walking through the narrow streets and greeting residents as if he were one of them. People began to comment. Some ladies whispered in the bakery, intrigued about who he was. The young people in the square speculated whether Arthur was some kind of famous artist or politician, and of course there were those who were suspicious. "That man cannot be here for nothing," said Mr. Raimundo, the grocery store owner. "Rich people do not appear in a small town without a reason." Clara also heard the comments but refused to listen. She herself, at first, had difficulty believing Arthur was there because of her, but with each visit, each conversation, each look, it became more difficult to deny. Arthur, in turn, was willing to dive into that new world. He began to explore the town, talk with residents, sit in the square to play dominoes with the old gentleman, buy fresh bread in the bakery, and even help with small tasks in Clara's shop. One afternoon, he surprised her by carrying heavy boxes inside, without caring about dirtying his linen shirt. "You do not need to do this," Clara said, laughing when she saw him struggle with a box larger than he imagined. "Of course I need to," he replied, out of breath, but smiling. "If I want to spend more time here, I need to learn to be useful." Clara shook her head, amused, but inside she felt something warm. Arthur, with all his fortune, was making an effort to fit into her simple life. This touched her in a way she could not explain. But while their relationship grew, the worlds around them began to clash. In the big city, Arthur's friends and partners began to question his constant absences. "You have been missing too much, Arthur," said Marcelo, one of his oldest partners, during a meeting. "You are missing important commitments. What is happening?" Arthur gave an evasive answer, but knew his double life was beginning to draw attention. He could not simply say he was in love with a simple woman from the countryside, because he knew he would receive looks of disbelief, perhaps even mockery. In the small town, the comments also grew. Some residents turned up their noses, believing that a rich man like him would never stay there for long. Others warned Clara, saying she should be careful, because rich people came and went without looking back. "I do not want him to play with your heart," said Miss Sita, a neighbor friend of Clara. "People like him do not know how to live like us." Clara listened, but remained firm. Deep down, she also had her fears, but did not want to believe Arthur was just another bored rich man looking for distraction. There was something in him, something true that his eyes could not hide. One afternoon, while they arranged the shop window together, Arthur looked at Clara and, on impulse, held her hand. "I know what they are saying out there," he began with a firm voice. "I know everyone finds it unlikely that a man like me is here. But I need you to believe in one thing. I am here because of you." Clara remained silent, feeling her heart race. "Arthur, I do not know if I can believe you can want to live like this. Your life is so different." He interrupted her, looking into her eyes. "My life may have everything, Clara, but it does not have what I found here. It does not have you." It was a moment loaded with emotion. The two remained silent, just looking at each other, as if that instant spoke more than 1,000 words. From there, the meetings became increasingly intense. Arthur took Clara for walks in the town, helped in the shop, and even began to get to know more of her family. He sat with Miss Lucia, Clara's mother, to listen to old stories and made a point of showing himself humble before the simple people. But behind all this new life, a shadow began to form. On Arthur's side, there was pressure, demands, and even veiled threats that if he continued absent, he could lose important businesses. On Clara's side, there was insecurity, fear that everything was temporary and that one day Arthur simply would not come back anymore. Their destiny was being tested, and both knew that at some point they would have to face the consequences of living in such different worlds. Still, when Arthur looked into her eyes, when he held her hand firmly, Clara felt that perhaps, just perhaps, he was the man who would change her life forever. And for Arthur, there was no more doubt. He was already completely delivered. Arthur Montenegro could no longer live divided between two worlds without this beginning to take a toll. Every time he returned to the big city, he felt the weight of commitments and demands. His partners, cold and calculating men, noticed his constant absence and the distracted air during meetings he once commanded with unshakable authority. "Arthur, you are different," someone said at a corporate dinner. "You missed deadlines, forgot documents, even made basic number mistakes you would never have made. What is happening, Arthur?" With a glass of wine in his hands, he stared at the reflection in the crystal and hesitated before answering. "Maybe I am tired of all this." "Tired?" Marcelo laughed, incredulous. "You have the life everyone dreams of. Cars, mansions, trips, power. You are tired." Arthur sighed, leaving the glass on the table. "Precisely because of that. I have everything, but I have nothing." The phrase hung in the air, strange for those men accustomed to measuring life by bank balance. Arthur stood up and left the dinner without looking back. He felt increasingly distant from that world. Meanwhile, in the small countryside town, Clara also faced her conflicts. Although she was happy with Arthur's constant presence, the gossip increased. Whenever he arrived in his luxury car, some whispers spread. "He will not stay," said Miss Irene, a bitter neighbor. "Rich people only appear to play with girls' hearts." "He will leave as soon as he gets bored with the novelty," others commented. Clara pretended not to hear, but deep down those words hurt. At night, when she closed the shop, she kept thinking if Arthur could really give up the life he had to stay there in the simple world she loved so much. Arthur noticed her restlessness. One afternoon, after helping her organize fabrics, he found her sitting alone at the counter, staring into nothing. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside her. Clara sighed. It is difficult, Arthur. People talk, comment, distrust, and I myself sometimes find myself afraid. Arthur held her hand and squeezed gently. Afraid of what? Afraid that one day you will simply not come back anymore. He remained silent for a few moments, feeling the weight of those words. Then he looked deeply into her eyes and answered. Clara, do you think I would trade all this I found here, you, your shop, your peace, for a world that never gave me true happiness? She tried to smile but still seemed insecure. Arthur then made a decision. At the end of that week, he cancelled commitments, turned off his cell phone, and spent 3 full days in town. He went to the fair with Clara, helped her choose fabrics, met neighbors, and even participated in a guitar circle with some local residents. At first, many looked suspiciously, but Arthur did not care. He wanted to show he was there for real, not just passing through. On a special night, during the town's patron saint festival, Arthur accompanied Clara to the central square, where there were food stalls, live music, and typical dances. He, always so accustomed to gala parties, found himself enchanted by the simplicity of that celebration. Clara laughed, danced, tasted snacks, and Arthur watched her as if she were the only person in the world. Are you having fun? She asked with shining eyes. Much more than at any luxury ball I have ever been to, he replied without hesitation. And in the middle of that simple and joyful crowd, Arthur held Clara's hands and for the first time danced in public, without worrying about what people would think. He was just a man and a woman laughing together while the music played. But while happiness grew, problems also grew. The following week, Arthur received an urgent call from his lawyers. An international contract was at risk because he was not present. Marcelo, his partner, pressured him to return definitively to the routine. You are putting at risk everything we built in years, Arthur, Marcelo shouted on the phone. Because of what? Because of an adventure in some little town? Arthur closed his eyes, irritated. Do not speak of her like that. So it is true, Marcelo said with disdain. You are in love. Arthur did not answer, but in the silence he confirmed more than any words could say. On Clara's side, the criticism also worsened. Some customers began to avoid the shop, saying they did not trust her work anymore because she was deluding herself with a rich man. Clara was hurt, but remained firm. One night, however, she could not hide her despair. Arthur found her crying in the back of the shop. Clara, what happened? They do not understand, Arthur, she sobbed. They think I am foolish, that you will abandon me. I myself sometimes am afraid. Arthur hugged her tightly, letting her cry on his chest. I am not going anywhere, he murmured firmly. I promise. But deep down he knew things would not be so simple. His world and hers were clashing more and more. And the moment would come when they would need to choose. Either they would fight against everything and everyone to stay together, or destiny would separate them. Still, in that embrace, in the silence of the small shop illuminated only by a weak lamp, Arthur felt he was willing to fight to the end. Arthur Montenegro began to feel the real weight of his choices. Until then, he had managed to balance the two worlds. On one side, the millionaire businessman everyone knew. On the other, the simple man who, in a small countryside shop, had found something no money could buy. But the rope was stretching too much, and he knew sooner or later it would break. The demands increased. Incessant phone calls came from his lawyers, from his team, from the partners. The Montenegro empire, built over years, began to show signs of fragility. His absence left gaps in millionaire contracts, in decisive meetings, in political and commercial alliances that only sustained themselves by the weight of his name. That morning, Marcelo, the closest partner, appeared by surprise in the small town. He arrived in an imported car, impeccable, contrasting with the cobblestone streets. He wore a starched suit, silk tie, as if he were in the capital. Clara, who was at the shop door, was surprised to see him get out of the vehicle and walk in her direction with firm steps. Good morning, you must be Clara, Marcelo said with a polite but cold smile. I am Marcelo, Arthur's partner. She, suspicious, just nodded. Is he here? Marcelo asked. Arthur appeared right behind, coming from the street, carrying some bags with fruits he had bought at the fair. When he saw Marcelo there, his countenance changed. What are you doing here? Arthur asked dryly. What am I doing here? Marcelo raised his voice. I should ask you the same. While you play at simple life, Arthur, your empire is crumbling. Clara remained silent, observing the tension between the two men. "This is not a game, Marcelo," Arthur replied. "Here is where I found peace, where I found love." "Love?" Marcelo interrupted, laughing with irony. "Arthur, you went crazy? Are you going to throw away years of conquest because of a little countryside shop and a girl who barely knows your real life?" Clara felt her heart tighten, but remained firm. Arthur took a step forward, facing his partner. "Do not speak of her like that." "I am trying to open your eyes," Marcelo insisted. "Do you think she will handle the weight of everything you carry? Do you think you will be able to renounce luxury, power, responsibilities?" Arthur remained silent for a few seconds, but then answered firmly, "If it is for her, yes." The phrase cut the air like a blade. Clara looked at him, surprised and moved, but also confused. Marcelo shook his head indignantly. "So you are willing to lose everything? Investors, contracts, respect, power?" Arthur took a deep breath. "Maybe I never had anything real." Marcelo said nothing more, got in the car and left, but left behind a trail of doubts. Clara, even touched by Arthur's words, could not help but feel fear. When they closed the shop that night, she finally spoke. "Arthur, I heard everything you said and I was happy, but at the same time I am terrified." "Why?" he asked, approaching her. "Because I know it is not that simple." Clara sat at the counter looking at the floor. "You have a whole world depending on you and me. I am just someone with a small life who can barely keep a shop open. How can I compete with all this?" Arthur held her face with both hands and spoke with a firm voice. "Clara, you do not need to compete with anything. I choose you." She closed her eyes, feeling tears accumulate, but could not avoid the insecurity overflowing. Days later, the pressure increased. The press discovered Arthur Montenegro was spending time in a forgotten little town on the map. Headlines began to pop up. "The millionaire abandoned business. Mystery surrounds Arthur Montenegro's whereabouts. Who is the woman who conquered the magnate's heart?" Reporters began to appear at the shop door, taking photos, trying to interview Clara. Some even invented lies, saying she had seduced Arthur to take advantage of his fortune. Clara cried in hiding. She did not want the exposure, did not want to be the target of hate. One afternoon, exhausted, she faced Arthur and said, "I do not know if I can do this, Arthur. I was not born to live in this whirlwind. I love my simple life, my peace, and you are bringing chaos into it." Arthur felt as if he took a punch in the stomach. "So, you want me to leave?" he asked with a low voice, almost trembling. Clara took time to answer. Tears ran down her face and she could barely speak. "I just want you to be happy, even if it is not with me." Those words were like daggers in Arthur's heart. He left the shop walking aimlessly through the narrow streets, feeling more lost than ever. He never imagined loving someone could hurt so much. That night, alone in his mansion in the big city, surrounded by luxury, Arthur realized the emptiness that suffocated him. The silence was deafening. He looked around and saw everything he had conquered, but nothing made sense without Clara. Meanwhile, Clara cried in her simple room, regretful for having been so harsh, but at the same time feared she was destroying the man she loved, driving him away from everything he had built. Their destiny seemed to hang on a fragile scale, about to become unbalanced at any moment. Arthur Montenegro spent days living a whirlwind of feelings. On one side, he had the pressure of the empire he built with so much effort, the demands from partners, the threat of financial ruin. On the other, he had Clara, the woman who showed him the true meaning of peace, love, and simple happiness. The distance between the two worlds seemed greater than ever, and each choice he made tore him apart inside. That rainy night, Arthur faced the contract papers scattered on his office table. The words got mixed up, nothing made sense. He thought only of Clara's teary eyes, of the pain she felt with the exposure, of the gossip that hurt her. He thought of her embrace, of the sweet smile when she opened the shop in the morning, of the way she arranged fabrics carefully, as if each detail were precious. "What am I doing?" he murmured to himself, passing his hands over his face. His cell phone rang. It was Marcelo. "Arthur, there is still time. Tomorrow morning we have a meeting with investors from outside the country. If you show up, we can save the empire. Otherwise," Marcelo's voice hardened, You can lose everything." Arthur hung up without answering. He stood up, walked to the window and looked at the illuminated city, cold, distant. He felt a tightness in his chest. Luxury made no sense. The immense buildings were just empty concrete. Without Clara, all that was a golden prison. The next morning, Arthur made a decision. He got in the car and drove back to the small town. The rain had ceased, the sky still gray, but inside him there was a flame burning. Upon arriving, he parked in front of Clara's shop. She was alone organizing some boxes when she saw him enter. Her eyes filled with surprise and distrust. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep firmness in her voice. Arthur approached slowly, like someone who fears a wrong gesture might drive her away forever. "I came because I can no longer live far from you." Clara shook her head, trying to hold back tears. "Arthur, I cannot and I do not want to be the reason you lose everything." He took her hands firmly and spoke with an intensity that made his voice tremble. "Clara, I already realized that without you I never had anything. I had numbers, buildings, cars, trips, but I did not have life. You gave this back to me. You showed me what it is to wake up happy, what it is to smile without needing a reason. I do not care what I will lose as long as I have you." She cried in silence but still hesitated. "And if one day you regret it? And if you look back and miss the power, the money, the recognition?" Arthur took a deep breath, looking into her eyes. "Maybe I will miss some things, but I will never miss more than I miss you when I am away. I can rebuild businesses, contracts, and companies, but a heart like yours, Clara. This I only found once in my life." Silence took over the shop. Only the wind beating on the windows could be heard. Then Clara collapsed in his arms, crying and laughing at the same time. "I am afraid, Arthur, but I also do not know how to live without you anymore." He hugged her tightly, as if he would never let her go. In the days that followed, Arthur made the decision many considered crazy. He sold part of his shares, broke with Marcelo, and publicly announced he would step away from business. The news fell like a bomb in the business world. Headlines dominated newspapers and portals. "Millionaire renounces empire for love." Some laughed, others called him senseless, but Arthur did not care. For the first time, he felt free. In the small town, life continued simple, but with a new energy. Arthur began to help Clara in the shop, to carry boxes, to serve customers. At first, many looked suspiciously, but little by little they realized he was not there temporarily. He was part of that place. One afternoon during the inauguration of a small square he helped reform with his own resources, Arthur did something nobody expected. In the middle of the party, before the gathered residents, he called Clara to the improvised stage. "I have been in many places in the world," he said with a firm and moved voice. "But I never found something that filled me like I found here beside this woman. Clara, you transformed my life." He knelt, taking from his pocket a discreet little box. Nothing ostentatious, just a simple and delicate ring, as she deserved. "Will you marry me?" The entire square held its breath. Clara brought her hands to her mouth, surprised, tears streaming. Then, without hesitating, she answered with an emotional shout. "Yes." The audience exploded in applause and laughter. Some people cried, others clapped hard. It was confirmation that that millionaire had really become part of the community. Arthur hugged her and kissed her under everyone's gaze, but for him only the two of them existed. For the first time he felt he had conquered something true, something no money could buy: love. And so, the man who one day entered a small countryside shop empty inside left it with a complete heart, willing to rewrite his story. The wedding was planned to be as simple as everything Clara loved. No luxury ballrooms, no hundreds of guests, no ostentatious decorations. Just a small ceremony in the town church, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. Arthur insisted that it be that way, because he had learned that true value was not in appearances, but in essence. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with preparations. Clara, with the help of her mother and some neighbors, sewed her own wedding dress. It was a simple dress, made of white linen with delicate hand embroidery. Nothing compared to the haute couture dresses Arthur could have bought, but it was perfect because it carried Clara's soul in every stitch. Arthur, in turn, helped with everything he could. He painted the church benches, helped arrange flowers, and even learned to make some typical sweets from the region to serve at the party. The residents watched, still incredulous, that millionaire with his sleeves rolled up, hands dirty with paint, laughing alongside the simple men of the town. It was as if Arthur had been reborn. He no longer wore designer suits every day. He traded luxury shoes for comfortable boots. The Swiss watch gave way to a simple watch Clara had given him, and he had never felt happier. On the eve of the wedding, Arthur sat with Clara on the porch of her house. The night was starry, and the silence was only broken by the sound of crickets and the distant laughter of children playing in the street. "Tomorrow we will be married," Clara said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "I still cannot believe this is really happening." Arthur held her hand and squeezed it gently. "I cannot either. I spent so many years of my life searching for something I did not even know what it was. And then I walked into a small shop and found you." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we will be happy?" Arthur smiled. "I am already happy. Every day by your side is a gift." She closed her eyes, feeling her heart overflow with love. The next morning the sun rose bright and warm. The town woke up festive. Everyone knew it was Arthur and Clara's wedding day. The church bells rang, calling the residents to the ceremony. Clara got ready in her room, surrounded by her mother, some aunts, and close friends. When she put on the dress and looked in the mirror, tears came to her eyes. She looked beautiful, not with an artificial beauty, but with the beauty of someone who was genuinely happy. Arthur waited at the altar, nervous like any groom. He wore a simple linen suit, elegant but without ostentation. Beside him was the priest, an elderly man who had known Clara since she was a child. When the church doors opened and Clara appeared at the entrance, Arthur felt his breath catch. She walked slowly down the aisle, guided by her mother, and her smile illuminated the entire environment. When she reached the altar and their eyes met, Arthur knew he had made the right choice. The ceremony was simple and emotional. The priest spoke about love, about commitment, about the importance of facing life together. When the time came to exchange vows, Arthur took Clara's hands and, with a voice choked with emotion, said everything he felt. "Clara, when I met you, I was a lost man. I had everything the world said I should want, but I felt empty. You showed me that true wealth is not in what we have, but in who we are and who we love. I promise to be by your side in joy and sadness, in wealth and poverty, in health and sickness. I promise to love you every day of my life, with the same intensity I feel at this moment." Clara cried as she listened, and when it was her turn to speak, her voice trembled. "Arthur, you came into my life like a storm, turning everything upside down. But it was the best storm that could have happened. You taught me that love has no barriers, that it does not matter where we come from or what we have. What matters is what we feel. I promise to love you, to support you, and to build a life full of truth and simplicity by your side." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Arthur kissed Clara tenderly, and in that kiss was all the love, all the hope, all the certainty that they had found each other. The party after the ceremony was held in the town square. Tables were set up, decorated with wildflowers and checkered tablecloths. The food was simple but delicious, prepared by the residents themselves. There was homemade spaghetti, roasted meats, fresh salads, and typical sweets. Arthur and Clara circulated among the guests, thanking everyone, laughing, dancing, fully enjoying that moment. At one point in the night, Arthur took Clara to dance. The band played a soft song, and the two swayed under the starry sky. "This is the happiest day of my life," Arthur whispered in her ear. "Mine too," Clara replied, resting her head on his chest. As they danced, Arthur looked around. He saw the simple people, the sincere smiles, the modest houses, and he felt grateful. Grateful for having had the courage to leave behind a life that did not fulfill him. Grateful for having found Clara. Grateful for having discovered that true happiness was not where everyone said it would be, but where his heart felt at peace. When the party ended and the guests began to leave, Arthur and Clara remained in the square for a few more minutes, just the two of them. "We did it," Clara said, smiling. "We faced everything and everyone." Arthur hugged her. "And we will continue to face whatever comes. Because now we are together." They walked hand in hand to Clara's house, which would now be their home. It was a simple house with whitewashed walls and a small garden in front. Nothing compared to Arthur's mansion in the city, but it was home. It was where love lived. That night, lying in bed, Arthur looked at Clara sleeping beside him and smiled. He had given up an empire, he had given up power and luxury, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable. He had gained a life worth living. He had gained true love. And as he closed his eyes, ready to sleep, Arthur knew that the next morning he would wake up happy. Not because of money, not because of success, but because beside him would be the woman who had changed everything. The woman who had shown him that the greatest fortune in the world is having someone to love and be loved by. The millionaire who entered a small countryside shop and found love had finally found his place in the world. The months that followed the wedding were a period of adjustment and discovery for Arthur and Clara. Living together in that small countryside town, so different from everything Arthur had known, brought daily challenges, but also immense joys. Arthur woke up every morning to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of fresh coffee Clara prepared. It was a stark contrast to the alarm clocks and rushed breakfasts of his previous life, but it was a contrast he embraced wholeheartedly. He learned to appreciate the slowness, the simplicity, the beauty in small things. Clara, in turn, learned to deal with the occasional attention that still came their way. Some journalists insisted on trying to interview them, curious about the millionaire who gave up everything for love. But Arthur and Clara maintained their privacy, politely declining most requests. They wanted to live their life without being a spectacle for others. Arthur threw himself into helping with the shop. He learned about different fabrics, about embroidery techniques, about how to talk to customers. At first his attempts were clumsy, but Clara patiently taught him, laughing at his mistakes but always encouraging him to continue. One day, a woman came into the shop looking for a special gift. Arthur attended to her, showing different pieces, explaining the story behind each one. When the woman left, satisfied with her purchase, Clara hugged him from behind. "You are getting good at this," she said. "I have a good teacher," he replied, turning to kiss her forehead. But not everything was easy. There were days when Arthur felt the weight of his decision. Days when he received calls from former colleagues, telling him about business opportunities he was missing, about the empire that continued without him, now in other hands. On those days, Clara noticed his distant look, the tension in his shoulders. "Are you okay?" she would ask, sitting beside him. And Arthur, looking into her eyes, would remember why he had made that choice. "I am more than okay," he would answer. "I am where I should be." The truth is that Arthur did not regret his decision, but the transition was not without its melancholy moments. He missed some aspects of his old life, not the luxury or the power, but the intellectual challenge, the feeling of building something big. Noticing this, Clara had an idea. One night, after dinner, she sat with him at the kitchen table. "Arthur, I have been thinking," she began. "What if you used your knowledge to help the town? There are so many small businesses here struggling, so many people who could benefit from your experience." Arthur looked at her, surprised. "You mean like a consultant?" "Something like that," Clara said. "But without charging anything. Just helping because you want to." The idea began to take shape in Arthur's mind. The next day he started talking to local merchants, offering help with organization, finances, marketing. At first, some were suspicious. Why would a millionaire want to help them for free? But Arthur persisted, and slowly people began to accept his help. He helped the bakery optimize its production, taught the grocery store owner about inventory management, and advised the town council on attracting tourists. It was rewarding work. Different from what he did before, but equally fulfilling. Arthur realized he could make a difference without needing a corporate empire. He could impact lives in a more direct, more human way. Meanwhile, Clara's shop began to prosper in an unexpected way. The story of the millionaire and the craftsman had, despite their attempts at privacy, spread. People from other towns and even cities began to visit, curious to see the place where such a romantic story had unfolded, and many left with purchases, charmed by Clara's authentic work. With the increase in sales, Clara was able to hire a helper, a young local woman who wanted to learn the craft. This gave Clara more time to spend with Arthur, to explore new techniques, to simply enjoy life. One Saturday afternoon, Arthur and Clara decided to take a walk outside the town. They drove to a nearby hill, a place Clara had loved since childhood. From the top, you could see the entire valley, the small town nestled among green fields, the river that snaked through the landscape. "This is beautiful," Arthur said, admiring the view. "I used to come here when I needed to think," Clara said. "When life seemed too difficult, I would climb up here and remember how small my problems were compared to the immensity of the world." They sat on the grass, side by side, watching the sun begin to set. "Arthur, do you ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Giving up your old life. For me." Arthur was silent for a moment, not because he was in doubt, but because he wanted to answer truthfully. "There are moments when I wonder what would have happened if I had made different choices," he said. "But regret? Never. What I had before was not a life, Clara. It was an existence. You gave me life." Clara leaned against him, moved by his words. As the months turned into years, Arthur and Clara built a life that was uniquely theirs. It was not the life Arthur had imagined when he was young and ambitious, nor was it exactly the simple life Clara had always known. It was something in between, a blend of both their worlds. They traveled occasionally, but not to exotic international destinations. They visited nearby towns, explored the region, always returning home with stories and new experiences. They hosted friends, both from Clara's simple world and some from Arthur's past, who had accepted his choice and wanted to maintain the friendship. These gatherings were always interesting, mixing different realities and perspectives. Arthur learned to cook, surprising himself with the joy he found in preparing meals for Clara. She taught him family recipes, and he experimented with new combinations, sometimes successfully, other times resulting in dishes they laughingly agreed to never try again. One spring morning, Clara woke up feeling different. She did not say anything to Arthur at first, but over the next few days, the signs became clearer. When she finally took the test and saw the result, her eyes filled with tears of joy. That evening, she prepared Arthur's favorite dinner. When he arrived home, tired from a day of helping renovate the local school, he found the table beautifully set with candles and flowers. "What is the occasion?" he asked, smiling. Clara took his hand and placed it on her belly. "We are going to be parents." Arthur's reaction was everything Clara had hoped for. His eyes widened, then filled with tears. He hugged her gently, as if she were made of glass, and whispered repeatedly, "Thank you, thank you." The pregnancy brought a new dimension to their lives. Arthur became even more protective, insisting Clara rest more, taking over more of the shop duties. Clara laughed at his excessive concern but was touched by his devotion. The town rallied around them. Neighbors brought baby clothes they had saved, offered advice, and shared in their excitement. It was the kind of community support Arthur had never experienced, and it moved him deeply. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Arthur's hand resting on Clara's growing belly, he said, "I want to be a good father, not like mine was. I want our child to grow up knowing they are loved, not just provided for." Clara squeezed his hand. "You will be an amazing father. I know it, because you have the most important thing, a good heart." The baby was born on a clear autumn morning, a healthy girl with Clara's eyes and what everyone swore was Arthur's nose. They named her Hope, after the shop where their love story began. Holding his daughter for the first time, Arthur felt something shift inside him. It was as if all the remaining pieces of his old self, the parts still clinging to his former identity, finally dissolved. He was not Arthur Montenegro, the millionaire, anymore. He was Arthur, Clara's husband, Hope's father, a member of this small community. And that was more than enough. As Hope grew, Arthur and Clara marveled at the joy she brought. The shop became a family affair, with Hope spending hours watching her mother work, eventually trying her own clumsy attempts at embroidery. Arthur taught her to read, to count, to ask questions about the world. He told her stories, some from his old life, but more often stories about the town, about her mother's courage, about how love can change everything. One day, when Hope was about 5 years old, they were in the shop together. A woman came in, well-dressed, clearly from the city. She looked around with an expression Arthur recognized from his old world, a mixture of condescension and curiosity. "Can I help you?" Clara asked politely. The woman picked up a few items, examined them, and then said, "I heard about this place, about the millionaire who gave up everything. I had to see it for myself." She looked at Arthur. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up all that wealth?" Before Arthur could answer, Hope piped up. My daddy says we are rich. We have love and each other and our friends, and that is the best kind of rich. The woman looked at the little girl, then at Arthur and Clara, and something in her expression softened. Out of the mouths of babes, she said quietly. She ended up buying several items and left looking thoughtful. After she left, Arthur scooped Hope into his arms. That was perfect, my wise little girl. Hope giggled. Did I say something good? You said something true, Clara said, joining the hug. And that is always good. As the years continued to pass, Arthur and Clara's life found a comfortable rhythm. The shop remained successful, providing enough for their needs and allowing them to help others in the community. Arthur's consulting work evolved into something more formal. He started offering free workshops for local entrepreneurs, sharing his knowledge without the pretense or competition of his former world. He found he was a good teacher, patient and clear in his explanations. Some of the businesses he helped grew significantly, bringing prosperity to the town. The mayor even offered to pay him for his services, but Arthur refused. This is not about money, he said. This is about community. This is about giving back. One evening, as they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary, Arthur and Clara sat in their small garden, watching Hope play with neighborhood children. 10 years, Clara said. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Sometimes like it just happened yesterday. Arthur nodded. Best decision I ever made, walking into that shop. Best thing that ever happened to me. You walking in? Clara countered. They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in each other's presence. Then Arthur said, You know what I realized? What? Clara asked. I spent so many years chasing after more. More money, more success, more recognition. I thought that was what life was about. But life is not about more. It is about enough. And this, he gestured around them, at their modest home, their daughter, the simple beauty of the evening, this is more than enough. This is everything. Clara took his hand. I love you, Arthur Montenegro. I love you, Clara Montenegro. And I am grateful every day for that moment of courage when I decided to step into your world. They sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Two people from different worlds who had found in each other something neither knew they were missing. Arthur sometimes thought about his old life, about Marcelo and the empire he had left behind. He heard through occasional news that the company had been sold, broken into parts, no longer the titan it once was. Some might have seen it as a tragedy, the fall of something great. But Arthur saw it differently. That empire had been built on ambition, on the relentless pursuit of success. It had been impressive but hollow. What he had now was built on love, on genuine connection, on being part of something larger than himself. It might look smaller from the outside, but it was infinitely richer. One day, a letter arrived. It was from Marcelo. Arthur hesitated before opening it, unsure what his former partner might say after all these years. The letter was short. Arthur, it began, I thought you were crazy. I thought you were throwing your life away. I was wrong. I have achieved everything we set out to do. The business is successful. I have more money than I know what to do with. And I am miserable. You were right. You had everything and nothing. Now I have everything and nothing. I do not know if I have the courage to do what you did, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I hope you are happy. Marcelo. Arthur read the letter to Clara that evening. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Do you want to reach out to him? Help him? Arthur thought about it. I think he has to find his own way, just like I did. But I will write back. Let him know that it is never too late. And so Arthur wrote a letter back, not offering advice but sharing his experience. He told Marcelo that the path is different for everyone, but that true happiness comes from living authentically, from connecting with others, from measuring wealth not in dollars, but in relationships, in purpose, in peace. He did not know if Marcelo would take any action based on his words, but he hoped the letter might plant a seed. As Arthur sealed the envelope, Clara came up behind him and wrapped her arms around him. You are a good man, Arthur Montenegro. He turned and kissed her. I am a lucky man. And there, in that small house in a small town, surrounded by simple things and profound love, Arthur knew he had found what everyone seeks, but few find. He had found his place in the world. He had found his purpose. He had found his home. Not in a mansion or an office tower, but in a woman's heart, in a daughter's laughter, in a community's embrace. The millionaire who walked into a small shop in the countryside had indeed found the love of his life. But he had found so much more. He had found himself. He had found meaning. He had found that the greatest wealth is not what you accumulate, but what you give away. Not in what you possess, but in how you live. And as he lay in bed that night, Clara sleeping beside him, Hope safe in the next room, Arthur smiled. He had no regrets. He had made the right choice. Love had been worth everything. It always was. It always would be. And with that thought, Arthur drifted into a peaceful sleep, grateful for every twist and turn that had led him to this moment, to this life, to this perfect, simple, extraordinary happiness. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like, as it helps the channel bring more stories like this one. Until next time. Amen.